What happens when Hollywood's most legendary tough guy loses his patience on daytime television? It only took 29 seconds for a friendly chat to explode into the most shocking confrontation Kelly Clarkson's show has ever seen. Subscribe now for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Last night on The Kelly Clarkson Show, what should have been a pleasant conversation about Harrison Ford's latest projects turned into an absolute disaster that left everyone in the studio speechless. Harrison walked onto the stage to huge applause, waving to the audience with that signature half-smile he's known for. Kelly greeted him with her usual warmth and enthusiasm, giving him a hug before they both sat down on the colorful couch. The first few minutes went exactly as expected. Kelly asked about his recent work. They shared some laughs about his experiences on various movie sets, and Harrison told a funny story about his dog that had the audience cracking up. He seemed relaxed, maybe even enjoying himself, which is saying something for someone who's famously uncomfortable with interviews. Kelly was being her charming self, asking thoughtful questions and genuinely listening to his answers. Then Kelly shifted gears to talk about Harrison's advocacy work for environmental causes, something he's been passionate about for decades. She praised his dedication to fighting climate change and protecting the planet. Harrison nodded along, clearly appreciating the recognition of work he cares deeply about. The conversation seemed perfectly safe, totally normal. But then Kelly brought up a recent controversy involving some comments Harrison made at an environmental summit. She smiled as she said it, clearly not anticipating any problem. Her tone was light, conversational, the same tone she uses for all her questions. So Harrison, you made some pretty strong statements last month about people who don't take climate change seriously. You said something about how ignorance isn't an excuse anymore, that people are actively choosing denial. Can you talk about that? I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in hearing your perspective. Harrison's expression shifted slightly. Not dramatically, but enough that you could tell something changed. His shoulders tensed just a bit. I said that people need to wake up and take responsibility. That's not controversial. That's just facts. The evidence is overwhelming. The consequences are already happening. This isn't a debate anymore. Kelly nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. I totally agree. But some people felt like you were being a little harsh, maybe even judgmental. Do you think there's a way to reach people without making them feel attacked? There was a pause. A brief moment where you could feel the temperature in the room drop just a little. Harrison looked at Kelly with those intense eyes that have stared down so many villains on screen. Kelly, the planet is dying. We don't have time to worry about hurting people's feelings. The audience went quiet. Kelly's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. Right. But I guess what I'm asking is, don't we need to bring people along with us? Don't we need to educate rather than alienate? Educate? Harrison's voice took on an edge. We've been educating for 50 years. At some point, people are choosing not to listen. That's not ignorance. That's willful denial. Kelly shifted in her seat, clearly sensing this wasn't going the direction she'd planned. Her smile was still there, but it was more forced now, more professional than genuine. I understand the frustration. I really do. Climate change is terrifying. The science is clear. But isn't part of the problem that when we talk down to people, they just dig in harder? They stop listening altogether? I've seen it happen over and over again. Harrison sat forward, his posture becoming more rigid. His hands gripped the armrests of the couch slightly. I'm not talking down to anyone. I'm stating reality. And if people feel attacked by reality, that says more about them than it does about me. It says they're prioritizing their comfort over survival. The audience was completely silent now. You could hear every word echoing through the studio. A few people in the front row exchanged worried glances. Kelly tried to keep her tone light, but you could see she was getting uncomfortable. Her fingers started playing with her bracelet, a nervous habit. Okay, but Harrison, you have to admit that not everyone has the same access to information or resources. Some people are just trying to survive day to day. They're not thinking about carbon footprints because they're thinking about paying rent. They're thinking about feeding their kids. That's their reality too. And they'll really be thinking about survival when the planet is uninhabitable. Harrison shot back without hesitation. This isn't about being privileged or not. This is about basic human survival. Everyone needs to care, regardless of their circumstances. The father working 3 jobs? His kids will inherit an unlivable planet if we don't act now. So yes, everyone has a stake in this. Kelly's smile was completely gone now. Her professional facade was cracking. That feels a little unfair though, doesn't it? Putting the same responsibility on someone working 3 jobs to feed their family as you put on, say, billionaires flying private jets? That's not equitable. That's not realistic. Harrison's jaw tightened visibly. You could see the muscle working as he clenched his teeth. Did I say that? Did I say everyone has the same responsibility? No, but everyone needs to do something. And this idea that we can't talk about the problem honestly because we might make someone uncomfortable is exactly why we're in this mess. We've been tiptoeing around people's feelings for 50 years, and look where it's gotten us. I'm not saying we can't talk about it honestly. Kelly's voice was getting firmer now, matching his energy. Her posture straightened, her shoulders squared. I'm saying maybe we should talk about it in a way that actually creates change, instead of just making people defensive. Because when people feel attacked, they shut down. That's basic psychology, Harrison. You want to know what makes me defensive? Harrison said, his voice rising slightly. His hands came up in a gesture of frustration. Watching the world burn while people debate the proper tone for discussing it. We're past the point of polite conversation, Kelly. We're past the point of worrying about who we might offend. The science has been clear for decades. The warnings have been issued. The disasters are happening. And people are still more concerned with how we talk about it than actually doing something about it. The audience members were looking at each other now, sensing this was becoming something more than a disagreement. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others looked fascinated. This was turning into a real argument on live television, the kind of thing that doesn't happen often on a show known for its positivity and warmth. Kelly took a breath, clearly trying to reset. You could see her attempting to find her center, to get back to the friendly host persona. I think we both want the same thing here. We both care about the environment. We both want to see change. I'm just suggesting that maybe there's a more effective approach than telling people they're wrong. Maybe there's a way to inspire instead of intimidate. I never said anyone was wrong, Harrison corrected sharply. I said people need to wake up. There's a difference. Is there? Kelly challenged, and you could see in her face that she immediately regretted it. The words came out more confrontational than she meant, but they were out there now. Harrison's expression hardened. Yes, there is. And the fact that you're sitting here defending inaction tells me exactly where you stand on this issue. Kelly's eyes widened. Excuse me? I'm not defending inaction. I've talked about climate change on this show multiple times. I've had guests on specifically to discuss environmental issues. Don't you dare suggest I don't care about this. Then why are you more concerned with protecting people's feelings than protecting the planet? Harrison fired back immediately. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kelly's face flushed red, and her famous warmth was completely replaced with genuine anger. That's not fair, and you know it. I can care about both. I can care about the planet and also care about communicating effectively with people. Communicate all you want, Harrison said dismissively. While you're busy making everyone feel comfortable, the ice caps are melting. Forests are burning. Species are going extinct. But sure, let's make sure we don't use harsh language. Kelly stood up suddenly, something she almost never does in the Reddies. Middle of an interview. You know what, Harrison? I invited you here because I respect your work and your activism. But you're being incredibly condescending right now, and I don't appreciate it. Harrison stood up too, both of them now on their feet facing each other. The lighting seemed brighter somehow, more harsh. The audience gasped. This was unprecedented. Kelly had never had a confrontation like this on her show. Condescending? I'm being honest. I'm being direct. If you can't handle honesty, if you can't handle directness, that's your problem, not mine. The world doesn't need more people dancing around the truth. Honesty? Kelly's voice was shaking now. Whether from anger or hurt wasn't clear. Her eyes were getting brighter, tears threatening, but not quite falling. You're not being honest. You're being self-righteous. You're being judgmental. There's a huge difference between telling the truth and attacking people from a place of superiority. Self-righteous? Harrison laughed, but it was a cold laugh, the kind that has no joy in it whatsoever. I'm fighting to save the planet. I'm using my platform, my voice, my time, to draw attention to the most important crisis humanity has ever faced. What are you fighting for? Higher ratings? Better celebrity interviews? More viral moments for social media? What exactly is your contribution here, besides making everyone feel comfortable while the world collapses around us? The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members looked stunned, their mouths hanging open. The camera operators kept filming, but you could see the shock on their faces behind the equipment. Nobody expected Harrison Ford to go off like this on live television. This wasn't in anyone's script. You could hear a pin drop in that massive studio. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this disaster, this moment that would be replayed and analyzed for weeks to come. Kelly's mouth dropped open in shock and hurt. Her face went pale, first, the color draining completely, then flushed red as the words sank in. "How dare you?" she said quietly, but the microphone picked it up perfectly, amplifying her pain for everyone to hear. "How dare you come on my show and insult me like that? I've done nothing but try to have a respectful conversation with you. I've praised your work. I've given you a platform to share your message. And this is how you treat me? This is the respect I get? Respectful?" Harrison shook his head. "You've been trying to tone police me since the moment you brought this up. You're more interested in how I say things than what I'm actually saying. That's not respect. That's PR management." Kelly's eyes were getting watery now, but she wasn't backing down. "You think because you're Harrison Ford, you can just come in here and say whatever you want? You think your celebrity gives you the right to be rude to people who are trying to help?" "Help?" Harrison's voice was rising to match hers. "You're not helping. You're part of the problem. You and every other talk show host who wants to discuss serious issues, but only in the most palatable, non-threatening way possible. You're not creating change. You're creating the illusion of change." The production crew was frozen, cameras still rolling, nobody quite sure what to do. This was spiraling completely out of control. "Get out," Kelly said suddenly. "Just get out of here. I don't need this. My show doesn't need this." Harrison looked genuinely surprised for a moment. "You're kicking me off your show?" "Yes," Kelly said firmly, though her voice was still shaking. "I'm kicking you off my show because I don't have to stand here and be insulted in my own studio. I don't have to let you talk down to me and my audience like we're idiots who don't care about the world." "I never said you were idiots," Harrison protested. "I said you were complacent, and I stand by that." "Then you can stand by it somewhere else," Kelly shot back. "Because I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with you treating me like I'm some shallow celebrity who only cares about entertainment. I care about real issues. I care about making a difference. But I also believe you can do that without being a complete jerk to everyone who doesn't approach things exactly the way you do." Harrison stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter but no less intense. "You want to make a difference? Then, stop worrying so much about making everyone comfortable. Real change requires discomfort. And real communication requires respect," Kelly countered. "Something you clearly don't have for anyone who questions your approach." "I have plenty of respect for people who deserve it," Harrison said coldly. "But I don't have respect for people who pretend to care while doing nothing." "I'm not pretending anything." Kelly's voice cracked slightly. And I'm not doing nothing. You don't know me. You don't know what I do or don't do in my personal life. You don't get to come here and judge me based on one conversation. This conversation tells me everything I need to know, Harrison said. You're more interested in tone than substance. You're more interested in feelings than facts. And that attitude is exactly why we're losing this fight. Kelly wiped at her eyes quickly, angry at herself for showing emotion. The only thing I'm interested in right now is you leaving. Security! Harrison held up his hands. I'm going. Don't worry. I've said what I needed to say. No, you've said way more than you needed to say, Kelly fired back. You've shown everyone watching exactly what kind of person you are. Someone who thinks being cruel is the same thing as being honest. Someone who thinks attacking people is the same thing as fighting for a cause. I'm not attacking you, Harrison insisted. I'm challenging you. If you can't tell the difference, that's on you. Get out! Kelly's voice broke completely. Just get the hell out of here. Harrison reached down and pulled off his microphone pack. The movement rough and angry. He tossed it onto the couch rather than handing it to anyone. The sound guy nearby flinched, but didn't move to pick it up. Gladly, Harrison said. I didn't want to be here in the first place. My publicist thought it would be good for my image. Guess they were wrong. Guess they were, Kelly agreed, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Because the only image you've shown today is of someone who's forgotten how to treat people with basic decency. Harrison paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to face her one more time. You know what your problem is, Kelly? You care too much about being liked. You can't save the world and be everyone's friend. Eventually, you have to choose. And you know what your problem is? Kelly called after him. You've confused being angry with being effective. You think if you're not yelling at someone, you're not making a difference. But all you're really doing is pushing away the people who might actually listen to you. People who want to listen don't need to be coddled, Harrison said. They just need to hear the truth. The truth delivered with compassion is a lot more powerful than the truth delivered with contempt, Kelly said, her voice steadier now. But I don't expect you to understand that. Harrison shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. I understand plenty. I understand that while we're having this argument about how to talk about climate change, the actual climate is collapsing. I understand that people like you think good intentions are enough. And I understand that this conversation is pointless. Finally, something we agree on, Kelly said. This conversation is pointless. Because you're not here to have a conversation. You're here to lecture, to judge, to make yourself feel superior to everyone else who's trying their my best. Involves actually doing something, Harrison said. What does your best involve? Nice interviews where everyone agrees with each other? That's not activism. That's a feel-good session. Kelly laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have no idea what I do. You have no idea what this show does for causes we care about. You're so busy being bitter and angry that you can't see that there are different ways to create change. Not everyone has to be a warrior about everything. Some people can lead with kindness. Kindness won't save the planet, Harrison said flatly. Maybe not, Kelly admitted, but neither will alienating everyone who might help. You can be passionate without being cruel. You can be urgent without being hostile. But you've chosen anger. You've chosen to make enemies out of potential allies. And that's why, despite all your work and all your fame, you're not actually changing as many minds as you think you are. The words clearly landed. Harrison's face went through several emotions: anger, defensiveness, and maybe just a flicker of recognition. But he didn't respond. Instead, he just turned and walked toward the exit. Kelly called after him one more time. You could have been inspiring today. You could have actually reached people. But instead, you were just mean. Harrison stopped walking, but didn't turn around. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something else. But then he just pushed through the backstage door and disappeared from view. Kelly stood there on her stage, breathing hard, clearly trying to compose herself. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Most chose to stay silent, too shocked by what they'd just witnessed to know how to react. Finally, Kelly turned to the camera. "We're going to take a break," she said, her voice hoarse. "We'll be right back." But nobody was thinking about what would come after the break. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. Harrison Ford, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, had just been kicked off the Kelly Clarkson show after a brutal argument that neither of them had seen coming. What started as a simple question about environmental advocacy had spiraled into a full-blown confrontation about communication, respect, and the right way to fight for causes you believe in. Harrison felt that Kelly was too focused on being polite and not focused enough on the urgency of the crisis. Kelly felt that Harrison was being unnecessarily harsh and pushing away people who might otherwise support his message. Both of them had valid points buried under all the anger. Harrison was right that climate change is an urgent crisis that requires immediate action. Kelly was right that alienating people with harsh language often makes them less likely to listen. But neither of them could hear the other past their own defensive walls. The moment when Harrison accused Kelly of caring more about ratings than the planet was the point of no return. That wasn't just a disagreement about tactics. That was a personal attack on her character, suggesting she was shallow and disingenuous. No host is going to let that slide, especially not on their own show. Kelly's decision to kick him out was bold. Most hosts would have tried to smooth things over, to salvage the interview somehow. But Kelly stood her ground, refusing to be disrespected in her own space. That took courage, even if her voice was shaking and tears were threatening to fall. Harrison's comment about only being there because his publicist made him was particularly cutting. It suggested the entire appearance was fake from the start, that he had no respect for Kelly or her show. That kind of honesty, if you can even call it that, destroys any possibility of finding common ground. The way he threw his microphone onto the couch instead of handing it politely to someone showed his state of mind. He was done with all of it. Done with the pretense of civility, done with the interview, done with Kelly. It was a gesture of complete dismissal. When Kelly accused him of confusing being angry with being effective, she hit on something real. Harrison has spent decades being passionate about environmental issues, but his approach in this interview was so confrontational that it likely turned off more people than it inspired. Passion without strategy often just becomes noise. Harrison's line about having to choose between saving the world and being everyone's friend was revealing. It showed his worldview that kindness and effectiveness are somehow incompatible, that you can't be both nice and impactful. But history shows that's not true. Some of the most effective activists have been those who could inspire people rather than intimidate them. Kelly's response about truth delivered with compassion being more powerful than truth delivered with contempt was perhaps the strongest point she made. She wasn't saying don't tell the truth, she was saying how you tell it matters. The packaging affects the message, whether Harrison wants to believe that or not. The accusation that Harrison cared more about feeling superior than actually creating change cut deep. You could see it in his face. Because there was probably some truth to it. Being the angry prophet feels righteous. It feels pure. But if that anger prevents you from reaching people, what's the point? Kelly's admission that not everyone has to be a warrior was important. There are different roles in any movement. Some people are the firebrands, the ones who sound the alarm. Others are the diplomats, the ones who build bridges. Harrison seemed to believe only the warrior role has value, that anything less is weakness or complicity. When Kelly pointed out that Harrison was making enemies out of potential allies, she identified the core problem with his approach. The environmental movement needs all the help it can get. Pushing away people who might support you because they don't do it your way or with your intensity is counterproductive. The moment Harrison stopped walking after Kelly's final comment about him being mean rather than inspiring was telling. For just a second, it seemed like maybe he heard her. Maybe he realized he'd gone too far, but his pride wouldn't let him turn around and admit it. So he just left, leaving the conflict unresolved and the damage done. Kelly's composure, as she called for a commercial break, was admirable. She was clearly shaken, clearly upset, but she maintained enough control to do her job. That's professionalism. That's what someone who actually cares about their show and their audience does. The audience's stunned silence spoke volumes. They came for entertainment, for inspiration, maybe for some celebrity gossip. Instead, they witnessed something raw and uncomfortable and real. Two people with good intentions at war over how to express those intentions. What made this confrontation so painful was that both Harrison and Kelly are on the same side when it comes to environmental issues. They both care. They both want change. But their methods and philosophies clashed so completely that they couldn't find any common ground. Instead of being allies, they became opponents. The irony is that if either of them had been willing to bend just a little to acknowledge the other's perspective, they could have had a powerful conversation. They could have shown that there's room for different approaches, that urgency and kindness aren't mutually exclusive. Instead, they showed how quickly conversations about important issues can devolve into personal attacks when ego gets involved. Harrison's parting image, walking through that door without looking back, will be remembered as one of the most dramatic exits in talk show history. Not because he threw anything or had a meltdown, but because the whole thing felt so unnecessary. A conversation that should have united two people who care about the same cause instead drove them apart. The door closing behind Harrison Ford represented more than just the end of an interview. It represented a missed opportunity, a breakdown in communication, and a reminder that sometimes the way we fight for things matters as much as what we're fighting for. Both of them learned that lesson the hard way, in front of millions of viewers who watched it all fall apart in real time.